Hello, my name is Brad Muniz, partner at Sobel & Company. I would like to welcome you to Sobel Insights. Sobel Insights is a weekly series. We provide some brief information on various topics. Our goal is to keep these sessions to 15 minutes. At this time, we don't offer CPE. Our topic today is employment state considerations, and our presenter is Karen Henderson, a director of tax at Sobel & Company. So Karen, when the CARES Act subsided and everything, and certain things that were relaxed during the CARES Act kind of started going away, one of the things I noticed, and really I don't know if enough people focus on, was people working in remote locations and the potential impact on the employer. So the question that I have to open up is, will the presence of an employee working from home create a taxable nexus situation for the employer in that state or in another state?
Brad, thank you for having me today and giving me the opportunity to speak on this. And the answer to that question is much more complex than people realize. Okay,
I'll go to the next question then.
When this all started, employers thought that the obvious things were going to be the issues with employees working remotely. You know, how are you going to get them, keep everybody feeling included and your culture, get them the technology that they need. Employers were not considering that all of a sudden they might have reporting requirements in different states by virtue of allowing somebody to go work there remotely. So for instance, if I am your marketing person and I decide that I'm going to go work in Florida or California, Arizona, somewhere where it's nice and warm and I'm not going to deal with winter. Florida is a different animal, but if we said California or any other state, and I'm doing business in that state, I have nexus there. I have physical presence. Somebody is there performing services on behalf of my organization in that jurisdiction. Now I have other considerations as far as my employer taxes, my disability insurance, am I registered in that state? It opens up a plethora of questions for the employers. And I know that a number of employers that we've worked with have come to us and they've had to do surveys of their employees. They were not even sure where their employees were and were they planning on staying there permanently or not.
Right. So, I mean, I faced it with a client that had an employee that was an employee for a long time and decided that they wanted to move to Florida. Put aside your comment about Florida being one way, for quality of life, and they kept their pay the same. And I said, that's great, but now you have physical presence in Florida, or fill in state name here, fill in country.
Exactly.
And they said, we didn't think about that. I said, well, for starters, they have a better quality of life and different cost of living. So I don't know why you kept the salary the same. And now they're also saving on state taxes individually. So they kind of got a raise too, but that's another topic, because I'm going to talk about employee consideration later on. So I've heard two terms that I don't know if I really understand what the difference is and what they mean. And I don't know if the viewers have even seen them. Domicile factors and statutory residency factors.
So that's from that's a great question. That's from the employee side. If I'm the employee and I decide now, I really don't like winter. And I'm going to I have a house in Florida and I'm going to take off for a couple of months. Am I now a resident of New Jersey or am I a Florida resident? Is it my domicile or is it a statutory residence? So you begin to look at a lot of different factors. And if people are having these situations, they should certainly speak with us about them, because residency audits are very large right now, especially in the Northeast. You know, Florida does not have a need to do a residency audit. They're not getting state income tax from you. But you need to look at the number of days in the state amongst other factors. They will go down to your credit cards and your Easy Pass that you'll have to pull your records if you're questioned on this.
So, and it's funny you said that about Florida. The one thing that I've always feared, and I've lived through these audits, and I know you have too. You know, it's income tax, income tax, income tax. But these states, especially what we went through during COVID, paid a lot of money in unemployment tax. or unemployment benefits.
Mhm.
And those funds, the federal government paid a lot of it, but those funds have to be replenished at some point. The way to get the replenishment is to put people back onto the unemployment, onto payroll and collect unemployment tax. So while Florida doesn't have income tax, it still has that unemployment tax.
It does, Brad, and excuse me. And the other issue to consider is there are a lot of high net worth earners, especially in the New York area, that were fleeing New York during this time. New York wants that money back. They're not going to let you out of the state that easily just because you up and left one day. Did you really move? Are you moving back in a year or 2 years? Was it a permanent move?
Right.
I mean, there are so many considerations that they look at. They will go down to where your family members live. You know, if you're, I can't, it is amazing the things they're going to look at.
So I think about something crazy, but I want to ask you about a day in a state. You know, where's your voting record? Did you change your license? How could you say you're voting in New Jersey still? You're so registered in New Jersey. And if you vote every election, how'd you vote? Oh, absentee, I get it. But how you know, I dealt with New York a lot in particular with clients that live in New Jersey, work in New York. And I'm not that this is only about New York and New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut type of thing, but in particular, New York has a big focus on number of days worked in the state. And, you know, you take holidays, vacation. How, and not just picking on New Jersey, but how do you determine a day in a state, especially like New York, or if other ones are similar?
So the states are very strict on this. If you so much as are on a connecting flight and it connects through LaGuardia, you're in New York. You might not have ever left the plane. You have to be so cautious if you have multiple residences and you are looking to have be a resident of a particular state, you have to be so careful with the other jurisdictions. You can't meet a friend for lunch. You can't go to a doctor's appointment in that jurisdiction without accounting as a day in that state. A day is not 24 hours, however you're going to parse it. A day equals a minute for residency. There is an app out there now that a lot of people, not a fair amount of people, will use to track them so that if they have a residency audit, it tracks everything for them. And you allow it where your geographic location is, it tracks it all by day, and you're able to pull up the records and prove where you've been.
Wow, it's interesting, but you know, the conspiracy theorists are going to say that somebody's using that information to follow them. So, you know, but it's good that there's a tool out there to help people, because there are a lot of the people that are watching this, I would say, our clients, you know, majority of the people in the world are trying to do the right things.
Absolutely.
And you will get caught up in this web of an audit trying to prove something that you just didn't even think, oh, I should have kept that.
So for most people, one of the biggest things that they're going to pull are your utility bills. If that house was empty, how did that utility bill get so high? If they look at your history and they say every month it was $250 and you claim no one was living there for 6 or 8 months and it still stayed at $250, there's an issue potentially.
It's interesting. Yes, I do know we did have a client one time that went through an easy pass audit, and it's tough. It really is tough. And I know people then say they won't have easy pass, but yeah, they have other ways, to your point, of finding out.
They are going to pull your cell phone records and they look at where the call originated from the cell phone tower. There's no changing that it was done.
That's why I went back to rotary dial. Hello.
So to your point, clients, if they're in a situation where it's questionable, it's records, it's documentation. Again, feel free to reach out to us. We will be happy to assist in any way we can and provide them the information and help them set up what they should do to track this.
So are there any particular employer considerations that you'd want to mention?
So as an employer, you would want to do a number of things. Again, you're going to have to consider, are you registered in the state to have an employee? If you don't use a PEO or some sort of leased employee situation, now you have to register for your employer withholding taxes. You have to make sure that you're paying all your disability taxes to that state. You know, we've had this conversation with numerous clients. Your employee's working at home and they trip going down the stairs to answer their Teams call. Do you have a disability claim now?
Work potentially workers' comp, you think?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I want to go check everybody's house for OSHA requirements now. You know that.
But these are all the things now that you don't think about. I say, I'm going to go work in Florida for 6 months because I don't like the cold. You know, and I decide to stay down there. Well, you don't start to think of all these ancillary issues that as an employer are seamless when we were all in the same location.
Wow.
You know, so you start to think about all these different things. So for employers, also having a system in place now to monitor where the remote employees are. I know that I have worked on personally a number of Nexus projects for clients because all of a sudden they realized that they had employees throughout the United States. And what do they need to do? And where do they need to withhold?
Okay. Yeah. So are there any particular employee considerations?
Yes. So I'm the employee. Now I've moved remotely. I decide I'm going to go live in Iowa. I have family there. I'm going back.
What? We say Hawaii, but go ahead, Iowa.
Okay. I was just picking somewhere, but what's going to happen is, what if I don't tell my employer and I haven't had taxes, income taxes withheld all year? I'm going to get to the end of the year, and whose fault is it going to be? You have to, the employee is incumbent upon them as well to update their records. And it's human nature. If I've moved to an area that, you know, maybe it's not the first thing I think about. We no longer get our checks mailed to us. Everybody has direct deposit. I don't need to think right away that that paycheck needs to get to me. Or maybe you didn't want your employer to know. I'm on Teams. Nobody's going to know where I am. But you're going to get to the end of the year and you're not going to have paid in your income taxes. And now you're going to have different issues with respect to that. So again, imperative to communicate between the employer and the employees as to what's going on. And for employers to really to do a survey. I know a number of them that now every quarter or twice a year at least are putting out something to their employees saying, what is your address? Where are you remotely? And is it a permanent or a temporary relocation?
And I guess that and not that you have to do payroll audits internally, but if something comes up like this, you have a business located only in New Jersey, and somebody says, oh, I'd like my direct deposit going to the Waikiki Bank, you know, Honolulu or us. And you might want to say, why are you opening up in the local branch in Honolulu? Oh, okay. So if something comes to your attention, you can't ignore it because
That's a great point, Brad. And then I think it's also just important to mention, if your employer is in New York City and all of a sudden you think, you know, I'm going to go work in Lake Placid for a while to get out of New York City, but I have an apartment in New York City. There's no saying that I'm not working in New York City now. You're still there, especially if your employer keeps their office open.
Mm-hmm.
New York has some very specific rules with respect to working remotely out of the city and what's deemed a remote employee. And oftentimes you're still responsible for paying your New York taxes. It's not easy to disentangle from New York. It takes some forethought and planning. And New York is one of those states that's going to ask if you moved permanently or temporarily. If you come back, if you boomerang, you go down there and you decide that you really miss New York City, New York City will so much as ask for the back taxes.
So we're just hitting the 15-minute mark, and you opened up by saying one thing. It's really not an easy answer.
It is not easy at all. And it has provided its own unique challenges.
Great. So my recommendation is, as always, if anybody out there has some questions or concerns about this, reach out to somebody like Karen that has been researching this and has a much better understanding than the person that you're just walking down the fairway with on the golf course. I hate those golf course conversations. Why is this? Let's talk to somebody who knows, like Karen. So Karen, I want to thank you very much for the presentation, and I want to thank everybody for viewing. That's it.
Thank you.